Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Cindy. I am currently a fourth year MD-PhD student at Columbia, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about my undergrad experience at Cornell. And I graduated in 2019, so that was about 6 years ago. I'll be making two different videos talking about my experience at Cornell. This one that you're watching now is going to be more focused on the pre-med experience, and the next one I'll be making will be more about student life in general and whether or not going to Cornell was worth it. So from the academics, the pre-med advising, to the research, and to the student life, I'm going to be breaking it all down in this video and basically answer the question, if I could go back, would I choose Cornell again for pre-med? And so without further ado, let's get started with academics. So one really important thing that I feel like high schoolers don't know is that pre-med isn't really a major. It's basically just a list of classes that you have to take in order to fulfill prerequisites to apply to medical school. So technically you can major in anything you want. In my case, I majored in statistics. A lot of people major in biology, for example, or chemistry or biochem, just because a lot of the courses for those majors overlap a lot with the pre-med track. And so it makes a lot of sense if you want to do pre-med to major in one of those life sciences majors. However, my recommendation is really to just pursue whatever you're personally interested in. If that's bio or chemistry, great. If that's something else, that's also great. All you have to do if you want to apply to medical school is to make sure you take all of the pre-med prerequisites. I've actually written quite an extensive blog post about the different courses I took during my time at Cornell, which I will link down below if you want to check that out. Some of the information I'm sure is a little bit outdated by this point because it's again been 6 years, but hopefully it will give you a sense of what kind of classes you would have to take. One thing that often gets brought up when high schoolers ask me about my experience with pre-med at Cornell is the idea of grade deflation. And I will say when I was there, especially with those beginning intro pre-med classes like bio or gen chem, I do think there is a little bit of that. At least the professor are definitely not afraid to hand out failing grades, and the classes are typically curved to a B- or a B, which looking back is not even that bad, but there are schools out there who typically curve to an A. And so was there some grade deflation? Probably yes, but at the same time, I feel like it built character, so I wouldn't necessarily say grade deflation should be a reason why you shouldn't go to Cornell. And I feel like this experience of getting some bad grades in the beginning of undergrad helped me build resilience in a way. I figured out how I could study better, how to better reach out to professors for help, how to take advantage of all the different programs Cornell had available. And I think that's actually something Cornell does really well with the pre-med students, is that yes, the classes are hard, but there's so many resources that you can use. So for example, when I was taking Gen Chem at Cornell, there was a whole supplemental class that you can take for every single level of chemistry, I think, including Orgo. Yes, the classes at Cornell were pretty difficult, especially the pre-med ones, but it does really prepare you for medical school. There was a week in medical school where I was feeling particularly stressed and overwhelmed, but I thought about my time back at Cornell and I was like, oh, this is actually nothing compared to the amount of stress and overwhelm I felt when I was a Cornell student. And so I kind of just pushed through and it was totally fine. And now oftentimes I feel like if I survived Cornell undergrad, I can do anything. And the next thing I want to talk about is the location of Cornell, which if you've done any amount of research, you will know it is in Ithaca, New York, which is a pretty small city. It's quite rural. The airport has, I think, 2 terminals and only flies to 3 different places. And I bring this up because the location of Cornell actually makes shadowing a little bit difficult because there's no big hospital system nearby. And in fact, Cornell is actually 5 hours away from New York City. And yes, Cornell does have a medical school. However, the undergrad location is actually 5 hours away from said medical school in New York City. And believe it or not, I went to Cornell at a time where there was no Uber yet. Uber existed at the time, but there was no Uber in Ithaca. So there is a small medical center kind of system in Ithaca, New York, but every time I wanted to go shadow, I would have to take a bus basically, and it was a little bit difficult to kind of navigate in time as well. It was not super convenient. But now it's better. There's Uber. You can Uber to the medical center if you find someone to shadow. I will say the one good thing about Cornell is the strong alumni network. So what ended up happening for me is I reached out to Cornell alums who are willing to let students shadow them. So I ended up, traveling to New York City during spring break one year and shadowing during spring break. And that's how I got my shadowing in. There's also a university sponsored program when I was there that allowed you to shadow a physician at that medical center in Ithaca. And so yeah, it feels like the university kind of knows that it's difficult for students to get shadowing, so they set up opportunities like that so you're able to go shadow some physicians. So yes, the location being in Ithaca, New York does make shadowing a little bit tricky, so my recommendation is that you should take advantage of the alumni network and any kind of university sponsored, pre-health office sponsored programs for shadowing that you can get. I will also say one other thing about location is that I actually personally really liked it. Like, I will talk about Ithaca, New York all day, every day. Loved it there. I wish I could live there. I would love to go back. For me, the location was wonderful because there was very few distractions. So like, really, all you have to do there is focus on your studies, build community with your friends. And that really is all I did. And I kind of compare that experience at Cornell in like a more rural location for a school versus New York City, where I go to medical school now. And the difference is really that in New York City, there's so much more to do. And I honestly feel like there's a lot less of a reason or incentive to really connect with your classmates. Whereas in undergrad, I feel like, you know, all you have to do there at Cornell is study and get to know your peers. And speaking of my peers, that brings me on to the next thing, is the toxic environment that people often talk about when it comes to pre-med culture, and specifically pre-med at Cornell. And I actually think Cornell tends to be a little bit notorious for having toxicity amongst pre-meds. Me personally, I didn't have a particularly bad experience when it comes to toxicity at Cornell. I feel like maybe like the worst experience I had with a fellow student would be if they really felt like they had to tell me their grades on an exam or something and then ask me about my grades, which very juvenile, but it does happen in college, believe it or not. But that is not nearly as bad as some of the stories I heard where people are like snoozing their roommates' alarms because they know that it's an exam day for them and they want them to fail or anything like that. So that has not happened to me personally, but I will say it helped that I was in a completely different major, so I never really felt like I had to hang around other pre-meds. And most of my friends I actually met through the orchestra at Cornell. And so yes, some of them were pre-med, but they're super nice. And so I got to be like quite selective about the friends that I keep. And so I thankfully do not have any of those like very toxic experiences. I do remember notoriously that there was like a physics cheating ring or something when I was at Cornell. And it wasn't the year that I took physics, but that year the physics class had take-home exams, and the professor had specifically instructed the students to not collaborate on this take-home exam because, hello, it is an exam. I very specifically remember hearing about a group of students who decided to work on the take-home exam together in the physics building, like in the atrium, and getting caught by TAs. And then in the end, the professor decided that because people were cheating, he was gonna make the final exam super, super difficult and basically not passable. And that was kind of like an interesting story. I guess not about toxicity specifically, but the length people would go to try to do well. That being said, toxic pre-med culture is a thing, and it is a thing no matter where you go. It's not just at Cornell. So my advice honestly is to find peers outside of pre-med that you vibe with. Next thing I want to talk about is extracurricular, leadership, research experience, you know, all of those things that are pretty important on your med school app. And I will say with extracurriculars, Cornell is kind of competitive with that, and it's kind of weird because you wouldn't think in high school that extracurriculars in college are really competitive, but at a lot of colleges, Cornell included, they kind of are. A lot of clubs somehow require an application and a whole interview process, and then you can still get rejected. So I think a lot of freshmen end up being kind of sad about that because they have envisioned this whole life in front of them at Cornell. They're going to do these clubs, get these leadership experiences and such, and they end up not being able to because they're rejected from the club. Even though a lot of clubs at Cornell are pretty competitive, I will say the volunteering based ones, like the service based ones, generally are not. I was in one that visited a assisted living facility every week, and that was just me showing up every week and hanging out with people, and that wasn't a competitive experience at all. As far as leadership goes, I actually did not end up holding any kind of leadership position at Cornell. And I think that ended up being just fine for my application because I was able to talk about, I guess, leadership experiences that are outside of holding a leadership position. At Cornell, there are also lots of pre-med clubs, and I think at least one pre-med frat. I think there might have been an additional one once I left, but pre-med clubs are basically clubs where people get together and talk about pre-med things, and sometimes professors come and give talks. you strategize with people at these pre-med clubs. And then pre-med frats are basically like pre-med clubs, but they're way more selective. The perks from joining a pre-med frat would probably be the network, and also I'm pretty sure the students have like a shared question bank that they have access to that the rest of the people do not. And they obviously have different service opportunities and things like that that other people don't have access to. I personally was not in a pre-med frat, but those are kind of the benefits that I saw from my friends who did participate in pre-med frats. Personally, I was not very interested in any pre-med extracurricular or pre-med club. I went to things that I was interested in and didn't go to things I was not. And so I never felt like that obligated to join things just because I was pre-med or the other pre-meds are doing it. I mostly just did whatever I wanted to do. And honestly, I would encourage you to do the same as well. Do what you're interested in and put 100% of effort into whatever you're interested in. Don't do something just because you think it's the right thing to do, and don't do something just because you see other people doing it. Next, on to research opportunities. So Cornell has 7 different schools of study, and honestly, you can do research with any professor from those 7 schools. So that means a lot of professors, a lot of opportunities. And I honestly think if you're interested in doing an MD, PhD, or a PhD or something very research focused in the future, Cornell is a good place for that because there are many professors and many labs. I ended up doing research with a professor in the business department, and he did digital marketing research. I was interested in his work and he was a great mentor, so I pretty much stayed with him all 4 years. Obviously, most of my friends who are pre-med did research in a wet lab, whether that be like biochem. Sometimes people did like biomedical engineering. I also know people who did their research in like public health and nutrition. And so yeah, lots of different opportunities and lots of different professors that you can probably reach out to if you're interested in research opportunities. And I really feel like at Cornell, there's no shortage of that. My personal opinion is that I never felt like students were fighting over one specific opportunity or one specific professor. I have always felt like there was an abundance of research opportunities at Cornell. I mean, it's my own opinion. Obviously, maybe other students would feel differently, but yeah, I think everyone who wanted to do research are able to get research. Next, we're going to talk about pre-med advising / advising support for when it comes to applying to medical school. I will be honest, I have never talked to a pre-med advisor at Cornell. There is a pre-health advising office, and Cornell does a good job of, getting students into medical school. Like, our medical school acceptance rate is pretty high for the students who apply. I will say the advisors at Cornell, based on what I've heard from my friends, is that the advisors are just okay. Some of them will give you discouraging answers. So like, for example, if you didn't do so hot in chemistry, for example, they might tell you like, okay, you can't go to medical school now because now you have a B. So those are kind of the discouraging answers I'm talking about when it comes to pre-med advisors, but I don't think this issue is unique to Cornell at all. My advice, if you ever plan on going to a pre-med advisor, whether that be Cornell or somewhere else, take what you need from them and then leave the rest. Like, leave the discouraging comments. Like, if you want to go to medical school, you will get into medical school, and don't listen to them that you shouldn't go to medical school. Like, that's ridiculous. But you would be surprised how many pre-med advisors tell the advisees like they shouldn't go to medical school because of like the 1B on their transcript or something like that. At Cornell, we also have the committee letter, and basically what that is the institution will compile all the different letters of recommendation from your letter writers and then submit that as a package to the medical schools that you're applying to. If your school has a committee letter process, you have to do it. Otherwise, it will look like a red flag to the medical school. But really, to me, it's like more like a formality than anything. You fill out the application through the Cornell portal, they compile everything, they send it to the med school. I have no idea what's on this committee letter. I will be honest and say that the Cornell committee letter process happens earlier than some of the other schools that also have committee letter processes. So if you think about it, the primary application for medical schools open in like May, June. At Cornell, we have to submit all of our materials for the committee letter the December before. So it's like a whole 6 months before you apply that you have to have a lot of things ready. Like, it doesn't have to be final draft version yet. Like, you have to submit a copy of your personal statement, and that doesn't have to be the final draft that you send to the primary applications for AMCAS. But it's like, oh, Cornell wants a version of what you have so far. I actually think it's really good because it pushed me to get a lot of that stuff done and get the ball rolling really, really early. But on the other hand, it was also kind of annoying because it was a lot of work. I think I turned in like a 20-page document with like my life story or something to the committee. And honestly, did they even read my 20-page thing about my life and why I want to be a doctor? Probably not. But was it helpful that I wrote all of these things later on when I was preparing my primary application and my secondary essays? Yes, it was incredibly helpful that I had all of that prepared. So I am thankful that I did all of that like way ahead of time. Another thing I'm super grateful for Cornell for is the Writing Center. And basically, the Writing Center is just a bunch of grad student tutors who are really good at writing, who will read your essays for your applications. Whether you're a student or you're an alum, like, they will read it. And it's completely for free. When I was applying, I was already an alum, I had already graduated, but they still read all of my essays, and it was super helpful. I hope that's still a program at Cornell, and if it is, like, that's something you should definitely take advantage of. To wrap it all up, I think Cornell is honestly such a well-rounded school, and so if pre-med doesn't work out, you will be fine. There's so many other majors you can do, so many classes you can take, and Cornell will prepare you well no matter what field you choose at the end. And that was kind of the deciding factor for me, because at the time in undergrad, I wasn't sure if I would still be pre-med and going to medical school at the end of everything. And I feel like Cornell is a well-rounded school in the sense that if I choose to do something else, I will still be fine, because Cornell is good at pre-med, but they're also good at other things. And with all that being said, I have to go, so I have to wrap this video up. If you found this helpful in any ways, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Feel free to leave me questions in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them or make a follow-up video. And with all of that, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!